Mr. David Hofman, former member of the Universal House of Justice, will now speak about Baha'u'llah, the promised one of all ages.
Amatul Bahar Ruhi Kanu, beloved hands of the cause, Janabi Furutan, Janabi Varga. Beloved friends, what a wonderful occasion this is. Make no mistake about it, it's an historic event that will go down in the annals of mankind's history. The fact that the first officer of this great city should have attended and proclaimed today, Baha'i World Congress Day, is a potent evidence of the power of Baha'u'llah's covenant to accomplish his purpose on the planet. This great city, one of the greatest capitals of the world, within 100 years of the ascension of Baha'u'llah, has recognized his faith as a world faith, and you heard his own remarks. Our religion, dear friends, is a religion of superlatives. It is not just another revelation in the whole series of successive revelations educating mankind and taking him on to his ultimate destiny. It is the most great revelation at the most great time in history. Everything in the Baha'i revelation is of the most great. Think of it, we have two manifestations of God to proclaim it. It was the Bab himself who prepared the way for Baha'u'llah by releasing into the world that great spiritual force which can only come from a manifestation of God, and which changed that bad old, sad old, crystallized, nasty old world of tyranny and oppression and poverty, prejudice, which culminating befittingly, as our own Dr. Esselmont quoted from Carlyle, in the French Revolution. That event, right at the end of the 18th century, was the trumpet blast for the new age of mankind, the day of God, when God's great bounties are poured out in full measure upon the entire human race. It is to the Bab that we owe the explanation of this wonderful covenant which shall not be broken, and this great day which shall not be followed by night. It was the Bab who explained to us that daytime is when the manifestation of God is on earth, that's when the sun is shining. Nighttime is the period between the ascension of a manifestation of God and the appearance of the next one. So that after the crucifixion of Christ, until the year 622, that was a nighttime in human life. And from the ascension of Muhammad until the appearance of the Bab, 1200 years and more was a nighttime in which the great civilization of Islam rose and declined. The civilization of Christendom came out of its dark ages and rose and declined to the end of the 18th century. And when mankind entered this period of chaos and confusion and terrorism and violence and breakdown of all the sanctions and subtleties and laws of human existence, make no mistake, dear friends, it is the revelation of Baha'u'llah which has caused this great confusion and chaos in the world. You may document that from his letter to Queen Victoria. The world's equilibrium hath been upset, through the vibrating influence of this this new world order, mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. The like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed and have not yet seen it. We are hopeful of the future. We know that it's going to be wonderful, but no one has experienced it yet. It is entire speculation and resting upon the promises of God. The Bab released into the human aura, that spiritual world in which we live and are unconscious of generally. He released the remaining 25 letters of knowledge. You know there are 27 letters of knowledge, and until the time of the Bab, God had only given us 2 of them. And it was the Bab who released the remaining 25 and therefore sparked off and sponsored that explosion of knowledge and invention and exploration and scientific investigation and social reform which took place in the 19th century. I ask you to think of the tremendous difference between the time of Baha'u'llah and the Bab and today. Baha'u'llah never rode on a train. He never rode in a motor car. I'm fairly certain he never pressed a switch to turn on light. His travels during those appalling banishments were done on horseback or on foot, from Tehran to Baghdad, and on that 1,000-mile journey across the plains of Ottoman Turkish Empire to Constantinople, on foot and by horseback. It is true that from Gallipoli to Egypt and Haifa, he traveled by steamer. But at that time, steam was just beginning to win its battle over wind. But he still sailed from Haifa to the most great prison in a sailing boat. The technical revolution which took place was due to this new power of mankind's intellect and invention to discover all the secrets of the material universe. But my friends, the social condition of the time was even worse. At the beginning of the 19th century, such concepts as world order or peace or brotherhood of man were either in the realm of science fiction or poetry. And that went on into the 20th century when people like H.G. Wells and Bergson and other Jules Verne and other writers of the early 20th century foresaw or were generally considered as seers when they talked about the brotherhood of man. But you think, when Baha'u'llah was born in 1817 in Europe, the Western world, it was if a poor man stole a loaf of bread, he could be hanged and his body exposed on a gibbet on a hill. If a poor woman couldn't pay the rent, she was deported to one of the great penal colonies, either of Australia or the southern states of America. The middle of the century, although it was lit up by a host of wonderful reformers, Lincoln, Wilberforce, Shaftesbury, Fry, Howard of penal reform, and beginnings of factory acts, was not adequate to give mankind the vision of a new world, that the exploration of the planet, the inventions of technique and so forth, they gave mankind greater command over the sources and the powers of nature. Instead of relying only on muscle power or wind power, at last technical energy was available to mankind. But you consider, even later, by the time Baha'u'llah was beginning to make his proclamation, around the late 1860s and early 70s, when he addressed the kings and rulers and religious leaders of mankind, even by then, his teachings were anathema. The oneness of mankind, hopeless. People didn't want it. Equality of women, no, poor creatures, we can't let them have the same stuff as men. It was an impossible program which he offered to mankind. They rejected it or ignored it, and as you know, as a result, the present chaos and confusion overtook the entire human race when the leaders had thought they were well on the way to establishing their own particular brand of world order or peace under the sovereignty and dominion of one particular race, perhaps. But this chaos and this confusion, which Baha'u'llah himself foresaw and foretold again in that wonderful letter to Queen Victoria, the signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, and much as the prevailing order appears to be lamentably defective, well, that bad old moribund old order has gone, and we are now in this torrential discord with Baha'u'llah there, riding the whirlwind and directing the storm. There is no doubt of the outcome, my friends. But this brings me to another point about the covenant of Baha'u'llah. There are two events simultaneous and almost synonymous. The ascension of Baha'u'llah and the inception of his covenant take place exactly at the same times. This is why there was never a hiatus, why the day was never to be followed by night, because daytime is when the sun is shining. Nighttime is when we depend on the moon and the stars, and the institutions and the leaders of the dispensations. Not so in this most great dispensation. The covenant of Baha'u'llah is in effect the extension of himself and his power and his authority right through the dispensation to guide and maintain and order the establishment and pursuit of God's kingdom on the planet. The center of that covenant, Abdul-Baha, has produced, again, the most great document, the greatest document the human race has ever seen as a document. Not only is it sacred text, but the will and testament of Abdul-Baha is undoubtedly the greatest document that the human race will ever produce, for it is the very charter of God's own kingdom. Now, friends, in that soul-stirring message from the Universal House of Justice, you heard them speak of the urgency of the times. It seems that there are a great many urgencies facing the human race today and facing the Baha'i community too. I feel we ought to dwell on two of those urgencies. The one is the one affecting the whole of mankind, and inevitably, therefore, the Baha'i community, for never forget, we are part of the human race. We have to go through whatever the human race has to go through. We shall be affected by it and come out to the same glorious future as they will. That great challenge for mankind is now to become mature. The human race has come of age, and it has been given, through the most great revelation of Baha'u'llah, all the guidance, the powers, the knowledge, the vision which it needs to emerge, to transform from youth to maturity. This is the greatest crisis in any organic life. That is when in individual human beings or in animals or trees, they become what they're going to be for the rest of their lives. And now is the time when the human race has to decide and become what it is going to be for the rest of its history on the planet. Thank God it is not left to us to decide any of those things. But by serving the revelation of Baha'u'llah and spreading the knowledge of his power, his majesty, his glory, and his love into every individual human heart, we may serve that purpose. Now, this particular urgency of the human race to become mature is closely related to the establishment of the lesser peace. Our beloved guardian, on whom we could speak for ages and ages and never exhaust the wonders of his ministry, he was the one who expounded the revelation to us and showed us two processes going on within the Baha'i community coincidental with that great process of coming of age of the human race. These two processes, my friends, in our Baha'i community are the maturation of the local and spiritual assemblies and the completion of the capital of God's kingdom on his holy mountain in Mount Carmel and the neighborhood of the plain of Akka. We are responsible for two of those processes which are running at the same simultaneous. They are not parallel lines. They come to a point, they converge at that particular point when the transformation is eventually made. Now, if we, on our part, do not keep up with the world's process towards the lesser peace, we could well delay the achievement of that tremendous, wonderful moment in human history when war will be abandoned, because these three processes are running together to converge at the end of this century. To those two processes within the Baha'i community, the House of Justice has added one more, which is entry by troops, and it's that about which I wish to speak now. All of us, every single one of us attending this magnificent Congress, are beatified by our presence here, by the very fact of our attendance and of our coming. And we can visualize in the remote distances of time throughout the centuries and the millennia. We can imagine our descendants of those days congratulating each other, being proud, thankful to God when they say, one of my ancestors attended that Second World Congress in the City of the Covenant. Think of that, my friends. But that's not enough. If they cannot go on to say, and attendance at that conference made such a transformation in their lives that they went out and conquered the world for Baha'u'llah through the power imbued into them at that great event when the King of Kings This is the significance of our great conference, friends, that we, the Baha'i world community, shall be now so transformed that mankind will never again be ignorant or heedless of the message of Baha'u'llah. We have the power to be the leaven in that lump which now needs energizing and spiritualizing, and we are the only ones who have this knowledge. But now, my friends, that brings me to a more spiritualized, deeper concept. Mankind today is starving for spiritual food, is dying of thirst. In the innermost private life of every man, woman, and child on the planet, there is this inner frustration, this inner lack, this hunger, this yearning for something better than what the world is offering to it today, or what they can discover in the world. When all the activities of mankind turn against him, his economics doesn't feed, clothe, and shelter him, his religion doesn't inspire him to kindliness and goodwill, his politics are unmentionable, his recreations are debased, nothing of the traditional and age-old activities of mankind, which at certain times in history, under the guidance of a manifestation of God, have risen to wonderful heights within the limitations of their ages. Nothing today gratifies this longing, this yearning in the individual human soul, frankly, for the love of God. Therefore, this is our opportunity, for we know the source of that divine love, Baha'u'llah, the Prince of Peace, the King of Love. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors, was the cry of one of the great prophets of Israel. And the King of Glory shall come in. Now let us from this great Congress send a signal to the rest of humanity. Lift up your heads, O peoples of the world, and listen and hear the message of your Lord, your Creator, who loves you, who wants you to be happy and joyful and in a blissful condition of human felicity and brotherhood and peace on earth. This is the message of Baha'u'llah. It is easy for us now, having been educated chiefly by our beloved guardian, to know how the world system is to operate and to attend our 19-day feasts and to encourage our local assemblies. But this is not going to, the knowledge of that is not going to win hearts for Baha'u'llah. It might attract a number of philosophically minded people or economists and others, but it is only this flame of the love of God which burns in our hearts with which we can light the unlighted candle in other people's hearts. Let them know that Baha'u'llah is their haven in distress, their shield and shelter in their woe, their hope and refuge in his need, their companion in darkness and the loving friend in their solitude. This is Baha'u'llah for mankind, dear friends. Recall that wonderful song of the great Isaiah, anticipating the coming of the Great One in the great day of God, when all his bounties would be poured out upon mankind. He should be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father. And of his judgment and kingdom there shall be no end, and he shall reign forever and ever. That is Baha'u'llah, my friends. Baha'u'llah, 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 Ya Baha'ul Abha.